Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Cleo and today we shall have a look at this ATX motherboard coming from ASUS known as the Strix B650E-F Gaming Wi-Fi. Before I begin, I'd like to thank ASUS Singapore who have loaned me this unit and to share it with you guys. Let's begin. In this box, it contains the motherboard unit, a set of Wi-Fi antenna, a pair of SATA cables, one is right angle, one is straight. These are the rubber pads for your M.2 area to have better support when you slot in your M.2. Additional M.2 thermal pad, one M.2 locking mechanism screw, 7 zip ties, a keychain, some brochures. These are the stickers, and it's meant for you to tape your CMOS batteries and maybe to your case, and the instruction manual. The measurement of the motherboard itself, this is rectangular, so from here to here is 305mm. Then from the top to here, this is 244mm. Now for the VRM clearance over here, from the rear I/O, which is from the motherboard bottom all the way to the top of the I/O shroud, this is 45mm in height. And for the side VRM, I mean the heatsink itself, from the bottom of the motherboard to the tip of this VRM heatsink is 35mm tall. This is how the motherboard look like, and it has a 8-layer PCB layout which leads to better headroom for you to do overclocking on your processor and your RAMs. Now starting from the back over here, the rear I/O is covered by this plastic shroud, and underneath this plastic shroud is a very big VRM heatsink. Same goes to the side. This is pretty big, and these are made of aluminium. The power phase of this MOSFET is 12+2, able to deliver at 80 amps. At this center area, this is where you plug in your AMD 7000 series, which is the LGA 1718 socket. 4 DIMM slots here supporting dual channel and up to 128GB of RAMs and a max speed of 6400, and it support Expo. Then at the lower section over here, you have 3 M.2s. This is the B650E chipset and 4 PCI-E slots. A minor correction underneath this armor shield itself, the chipset is not B650E. In fact, it's a B650. Before I begin talking about the PCI-E slots and the M.2 armor shield and the slots itself, now on the rear I/O, where you can see this part over here, this is where the ARGB effects will be, and will be the only part that has the effect. Moving on, I'll start off with the PCI-E slots. You have a total of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The top slot here with the metal reinforcement is PCI-E 5.0 running at X16, followed by this two here, which is PCI-E 4.0 and running at X1, and this over here, same as the top, which is PCI-E 4.0 but running at X16. So there are a total of 4. Now moving on to the M.2, there are 3 armor shield. When you remove the armor shield itself, right, all these screws that you unscrewed are captive to the armor shield itself, and each have its own thermal pad for the M.2s. See, all are the same, and the material on this M.2 armor shield are all aluminium. Start off with the top M.2. This slot is controlled by the processor itself and is PCI-E 5.0, where it you can plug in a generation 5, generation 4 or generation 3 M.2 SSD. Else for the bottom two is PCI-E 4.0, which allows you to plug in generation 4 and 3 M.2 SSD. Now take note, if you occupy the last section over here, right, your last slot PCI-E will not run as X16. It will only run at X8, as these two are shared. So take note on this. Besides this, right, on each M.2 slots, you have this locking mechanism at the back, see, of each. Now, this is whereby when you slot your M.2, right, instead of screwing the back, you just swivel this and lock into position, and you will be stationed over there. So same goes to the rest. Before I talk about the connectivity of this motherboard itself, take note on the audio section over here. ASUS has made use of this Supreme FX technology on this motherboard and is making use of the ALC 4080 codecs. As for the connectivity, I'll start off with this 4-pin PWM fan header, whereby it allows you to connect your rear fan. It's at a very good location. I like this very much. On the lower left, this is meant for your front audio connector. Next will be this SPDIF connector, whereby you have to purchase a optional device where you can make use of optical audio. Next will be a 4-pin PWM fan header. This is the COM port for debug, whereby you have a device connected to this. So while you're testing the CPU, the RAMs and such, this device will detect, giving you the ER code known as the error code. Then from there you can rectify the issues. Next will be the Thunderbolt connector, and this is the clear CMOS pin, whereby if you short this pin and release after 5 seconds, whatever you have set on the motherboard itself in UEFI, it will bring back to factory reset, or should I say default settings. These two are the addressable RGB connectors, which is 5 volts, followed by this T sensor. You can purchase a optional sensor where you connect to this, right, you can detect the temperature, be it your processor, your RAMs, or maybe your M.2s. And this is CPU over voltage, whereby you can disable or enable. When you enable it, right, it gives you the flexibility to overclock even more, as in like to raise your V-core even more. These two headers here are the version 2.0 USB headers, followed by another 4-pin PWM fan headers, and these are meant for your front I/O, like the power switch, the reset switch, the HDD activity LEDs, and the power LEDs. Moving at the front, a 4-pin PWM fan header, 4 right angle SATA port. This is the USB 3.2 front header, or should I say meant for your front I/O, and this is a Type-C connector for your front I/O, followed by a 24-pin connector where you draw power from your power supply and to provide power to all these areas over here. Next will be a 3-pin 5-volt ARGB, and right behind it, not too sure if you can see. Now these are the LED postcode, whereby if there is error on your processor, your RAMs, or even your GPU itself, right, this will light up so that you can do troubleshooting on all those areas. Now at this end over here, at the top, you'll be given a RGB 4-pin 12-volt connector. This is a 4-pin PWM fan header, and followed by this two, same thing, 4-pin PWM fan header. And what are the difference? Well, this is for CPU op, this is for the CPU pump, and right inside is for your CPU fan header. Now on the extreme right, you have a 8-pin EPS connector and a 4-pin EPS connector. Now at all times, right, you only need one 8-pin EPS connector, whereby you provide power for your VRMs and your processor. As for this 4-pin EPS connector, this is whereby you do extreme overclocking, making use of liquid nitrogen. At the rear, you're given a display port and a HDMI port, and these two ports are meant for your integrated graphic that is built in your processor. Next, a provision of 12 USB connection points, where you have 10 Type A and 2 Type C. Starting off with the black ports over here, this is version 2.0, and you have a dedicated USB port for your BIOS flashback. And the blue section over here is version 3.2, generation 1, that has a transfer speed of 5 GB per second. Else for the RAID over here is version 3.2, generation 2, that has a transfer rate of 10 GB per second. And as for this two Type-C port, one which is generation 2, having a transfer rate of 10 GB per second, and this is generation 2 times 2 that has a transfer rate of 20 GB per second. Right below this RAID USB port, it has a BIOS flashback button. These are the Wi-Fi adapter, whereby you connect your Wi-Fi over here, and it's 6E, and in this adapter it does support Bluetooth. Over at this section, this is where the audio are, and it's 7.1 channel, whereby you connect your microphone in, your speaker, your line in, your rear speaker, and a subwoofer. Just to show you the ARGB effects over here, let me just turn off the lights, and when I turn on, see, this is the ARGB effect. It's not overpowered, it's very fusion, and it reacts upon the motherboard utility known as Armor Crate. There is a section called Aura Sync. This is how the UEFI user interface is. There are two modes. This is easy mode, and if you toggle F7, it will give you the advanced mode. In advanced mode, you have more in details settings that you can do. See, there are plenty of settings you can do. Now for easy mode, it's just for a end user experience, whereby it shows you all the details over here, as in what are the stuff that you have placed in your motherboard, like the processor, the RAMs, the M.2s and such. And it does show you the temperature of the CPU and the motherboard temperature, and the core voltage that it will pull from the motherboard in order to provide power to the processor. And you have this easy system tuning, whereby you just do a click and it will just bring up the performance of your system. Then over here, these are all the fans being monitored. Like what I have right now, I have a radiator fans connected to my AIO, and my pump, depending on which pump you're using, if your pump does not have RPM readings, right, it will not show you over here. Then you can set the RAM's expo profile to pull the profile. Let me just show you. See, you can pull when you enable, right? See, it will just pull your RAMs to 6000. Mine is actually from 4800 to 6000. And of course, you can set the fan. Now the fan itself, right, you can set it as auto detect, or you can set it to DC or PWM. When you set to PWM itself, you can do all your fan curves individually on all these headers. Example, CPU fan, the chassis fan 1 to 4, and the AIO pump. Let me just show you. Now I know that I have fans on the CPU fan, so what I do is I'll click over here, manual. Then from here, as you can see, there are dots over here. You can adjust accordingly to your prescription curve. Let's say at 30 degrees, right, I want my fan to pump at 50%, or at 45 degrees, I will want my fan to pump at 65%. Okay, around there. Or you can set, you know, as long you can set all these curves and click on apply, so that each and individual fan you can do the curve. So this is one way to do your fan curve. Now let me just take you to the advanced mode. Else for advanced mode, as mentioned, there are lots of other stuff that you can set. For example, you can set the language of this motherboard if you choose to. Okay, for example, see, it's all in Chinese words. Then I'll set it back to English. Or you can set a security lock on your UEFI, whereby you do not want anybody to access to your UEFI. You can click on security and to set the password to secure your UEFI, so that if anyone try to access to your UEFI, you will be prompt with a challenge of password. Now, besides this, right, AI Twinkle, this is where you set your XMP profile, or should I say the Expo profile, which I've already done on the easy mode, which I've shown you. Right here, you can do it too. See, not an issue. Then, in depth, you can also fiddle with all the settings over here, like the RAM timing, you can set to, not a problem. Then of course you can set the offset or the load line calibration of your CPU. Then you can also set your core voltage offset and such. So these are all the settings that you can do in the advanced mode. Right, just to show you everything, and just a brief run through. And of course you can set your memory voltage, which is, some of you want to do higher clock speed, so you need to pump the voltage on the RAMs itself. And advanced mode, so these are the features down here that you can set. Now just to show you that those that I use, I often use this PCI system settings, whereby you enable your resizable bar on your discrete graphic card. And also I will use things like the APM configuration. I will set this as enable to make use of wake up on LAN. Then besides this, SATA configuration, if you have hard disk on your SATA ports itself, right, you can set hot swap. So when you enable hot swap itself, right, so what you do is on Windows itself, you can eject the SSD, then you can just unplug the hard disk. But make sure, if you want to do that, make sure that the SATA hot plug is set to enable, so that you can just pull out when you eject from Windows. Then besides this, I will make use of the AMD overclocking to play with the precision boost overdrive, whereby I can set this manual, or should I say advanced, then the limits to manual, and I just can set the figures over here. So things like that. And I can play with the curve optimizer, where either I set it to all cores. If I don't have time to detect per core, I'll set it 20. Then for per core itself, right, yeah, it's really tedious. You can set all the way. If you have a 7950X, right, you gotta figure all the figures out yourself, which I will be doing later. So yeah, these are the settings that you can do. Then else for monitor itself, see, these are the things that you can monitor, like your VRMs and such. All the readings are from here. And for fan speed monitoring, is just to tell you how much RPM is your fans running at. And now, before that, I taught you how to set your fan curve on the easy mode. Right now, you can set it on advanced mode too. All you need is just to go to the queue configuration. Then as you can see, this is my, okay, this is actually my radiator fans. So I can set, for example, this and to full speed. I can do that, no problem. Then when you look at the fan RPM, right, see, it went up all the way. So this is how you actually set the fan speed or the RPM. Or you can, if you want to, you can set to manual. Now this is manual key in, which I prefer compared to the graph, because I know that these are the temperature points. See, these are the temperature point. Then from there I can set the percentage of how much I want the fan to ramp up. If you are comfortable with using the graph, okay, let me show you here. If I press F7, then yeah, if you're familiar with the graph, then go ahead with the graph under easy mode. Alright, besides this, on boot, section here, right? Now, this is something that you will need to know if you are a gamer. In case if you're running Windows 11 and you're playing a game called Valorant, you will need to set your secured boot to standard, which is this one. Because most of the guys, I should say, can't play Valorant because they have not enabled this secure boot. But by enabling this, right, make sure that if, let's say, you do some migration on your system itself or do a fresh installation, make sure you disable this before you format your M.2 and to rebuild a new OS. Besides this, you got boot configuration. Now, I do not have the boot configuration with me because based on the fact that I did not plug a M.2 in this system, I'm just showing you the UEFI. If you have multiple of M.2, in this case, you can have 3. And if 3 have different OS, you can select that and to configure the appropriate drive to boot as your master drive, as in like the boot drive. Come to tools. These are the essential, whereby if you do not use the BIOS flashback and to use the UEFI to update your BIOS, you can choose this ASUS Easy Flash, this one. But normally I'll use the BIOS flashback. It's more convenient. Then besides this, there's this secure erase. Kindly do not use this on your M.2. Make sure to make use of your M.2 utility application or the software to do the secure erase. I've tried this once on one of the M.2 and my M.2 got corrupted. From that day on, I dare not to use this. Alright, so just be careful. Now for Armoury Crate, this is something whereby if you were to have a fresh Windows installed, you can set in UEFI to enable it to prompt yourself to install the Armoury Crate instead of going through the website and clicking on Armoury Crate and to download. With this enabled, right, when you boot up your system itself, it will prompt, do you want to download and install this Armoury Crate application on your system? And normally I do install Armoury Crate if it's ASUS, where you use the Aura Sync for your ARGB and things like your fan curves and such. You can do it on Windows too. So these are the things that you can do with this UEFI interface. Then for exit, these are as usual. I believe everyone know how to use this. Either load, optimize default, save the settings that you've done in your UEFI, and to exit, reset, or you can discard. I have a mixed feeling of this motherboard itself. There are pros, there are cons. I'll start off with the pros. First of all, this is an 8-layer PCB motherboard. When I hold on it, right, it's very rigid. It doesn't flex. And add on to this rigidity, as you can see, all this chunky heatsink, VRM heatsink, and the M.2 armor shield, inclusive of the chipset armor shield. All these are in big blocks. So when you mount this on the motherboard itself, right, it adds on to the rigidity. It doesn't flex, which is good. It looks premium, it feels premium. Next will be the M.2s on the armor shield itself. On each armor shield, there are 2 screws, which is captive on the shield itself. So when you unscrew this shield to place your M.2, you will not lose these screws. Well thought of. And inside, or should I say underneath this shield itself, there is a M.2 locking mechanism. Another well thought of thing, whereby when you slot your M.2 in place, right, you can just use the locking mechanism to lock them in place. Instead of having the tiny screw that I need to screw in, sometimes I lose that screw. And once I lost that screw, that's it. I can't, put my M.2 in place. So this is one fantastic design. Next will be the layout of the fan headers. As you can see, it's scattered all around. There are 3 over here. Then there's 1 over here. There's 1 over here. Let's see. And there's 1 at the rear. And why I say I like this layout, mainly all the fans, be it the rear, the top, the front, or the bottom, is accessible to all these headers, which is near reach, so that it will reduce the cable clutter. For example, some of the motherboards, right, for your rear fan, right, you have to route all the way to the bottom or all the way to the front, which I find is very clumsy. So this is one bonus point. Then next will be the PCI-E slot, whereby there is this button over here. If you take note, Now, this is to release the catch on your GPU itself. As in the past, right, I will need to dig in my fingers underneath and to push the lever before you can remove the GPU. Having this, right, when you press it, it will release and you can just pull out. Besides all those points that I pointed out, best part, this motherboard in fact is a USB connector heaven. Reason being, right, there are so many USB connectivity, total of 12. 10 is type A and 2 is type C. Personally, I only need 5. So this is a bonus point to it. Coming to the cons itself, right, now for all these fans headers over here, which is total of 7, which is inclusive of this, let me just turn over. The layout is good, but the thing is that all these headers are only 1 ampere load. For those beginners who start building up PCs, right, they might not take note on some of the fans they have purchased. As in written on the fans itself, there are amperage. This is 0.38. Imagine that if this is 0.4 ampere, and as a beginner, right, I just daisy chain blindly without taking note at the amperage itself. So having 3 fans total up is 1.2 ampere. So all these fan headers are rated as 1 ampere. If I were to connect 3 fans in daisy chain and to plug to either of this fan headers, right, over here, then I'm going to have a problem whereby I will overload the headers and it can cause the melting of the fan headers on the motherboard or on the fan itself. So I hope that they can do it in such a way that all these fan headers, right, are rated 2 ampere instead of 1 ampere. So this is one of the downfall. Now the next thing is on the postcode itself. As you can see, right, the postcode over here, the LEDs, is located quite near the connection point from the top and from the bottom. These are the two RGB and the ARGB connector, and this is the fan connector. Yeah, you might say that I can tuck the cables, but what if in the event if the cable go back or bend backwards to their original position, right, then it might cover this postcode. I would prefer that they would to shift this postcode away from the connectors, probably place it over here or maybe over here. Now the last thing that I want to talk about, whereby yes, 3M.2 is more than sufficient for most people, but I would prefer to have the 4th M.2, as in to have 4 M.2s instead of 3. Reason being, I feel that this is a premium board, you should have 4 instead of 3. I hope you guys did enjoy what I've shared with you, and thanks to ASUS Singapore who have loaned me this unit to share with all my viewers. And for those of you who are actually new to my channel, welcome to my channel. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, take care, goodbye, see ya.